Hey guys, it's Matt here, and today I'm bringing you another episode of Matt Rants. So, what am I ranting about today? Well, before I talk about what I'm ranting about today, I want to mention that I hope this rant is actually coming out closer to the, right after the Did Millennials Kill Toys R Us rant, unless there's some bigger news piece that kind of pops out in the, in between. I hope this comes out kind of closer to that rant. Now, why am I doing this rant right now, right? Why am I talking about why retro video game prices are so high, right? Why am I talking about retro game prices? Well, because I want to do something that wasn't as A, topical, and B, just generally like either depressing or intense. I mean, I know this topic might end up getting a little bit divisive. We'll see how the comment section is going to go with this one, but I wanted to do something that was going to be just a bit more calming, right? Because I feel like we've been talking about, other than Nintendo Direct, some of the Rants episodes have been kind of heavy. So I thought this one would be kind of fun to do. And also because there are a lot of new fans that are coming into the fandom, and that's awesome, right? In no way do I not want people to come in and to enjoy retro video games, but I do think we should look at a few of these points here and these reasons that I'm going to bring up throughout this rant as to why retro video game prices are so high. Because I think with retro video game prices, this isn't something you can just Google. Sure, some people will try to use things like price charts and go on eBay and Amazon, but it feels like unless you're talking about it on some kind of forum and you get into some kind of community, you don't really know why these are so high and how we got to this position, right? What brought us here? And frankly, maybe you might even ask, well, how do we get out of it, right? Which I think that whole thing is for a completely other, different rant. But yeah, so let's focus right now on why they're so high. And I'm not going to say if this is a good or a bad thing necessarily. I mean, obviously high prices aren't the best for anyone really, but it's not so much about what should we do to stop it, just the idea that it's here, right? And why is it here? So point number one, right? Why are retro video game prices so high? Well, the first one is, and this is a very interesting one because, eBay. I mean, just literally just pointing it out, just eBay. Now, I'm not blaming only eBay. Again, we're going to go through a few different points here, but the first one is eBay. Now, you can consider Amazon as well, but I don't want to say that online kind of mom and pop or smaller video game selling or reselling websites, I don't want to blame them, right, personally, because they're just like, other retro video game mom and pop stores. They're just trying to get by. They're trying to do their thing. They got minimal amount of stock. They're not, if they're, some people might say, oh, but they're, selling it at exorbitant amounts or higher than it is on, other websites and things like that. Well, if they're buying it from the same places you're buying it from, because retro games are, they're not being made anymore. They're retro for a reason. They're out of print. Then of course they're going to have to sell a little bit higher just to make some kind of revenue, something back, right? Just kind of keep themselves in business. So, but getting back to eBay itself, right? eBay or Amazon. So the reason why, one of the reasons why video games have kind of gone up in price, certain retro ones, is because of the fact that when we look at, let's say you want to sell a video game, right? And you want to sell it for $5. Right? So you talk to a friend about it, and this is in real life, in person, and you talk to a friend and you say, I want to give you this for $5. And the friend says, you know what? That's a good deal, actually. eBay has it for $7, and it's not free shipping. So they say, you know what? Sure, right? Whatever the game is, they'll pay you $5 for it. All you have to do is go see them. And depending on, maybe if you go to school with them, either high school or college, or if you work with that friend, or, if you do have to go travel to see them, maybe, it's an unlimited Metro card, or maybe you can do other things in the area that you were planning on doing. So it's just, it's cost effective for you, even if you're spending some gas money, you're getting into a car, whatever it might be, it just makes sense that you're getting that $5. Maybe he's buying, or she or they are buying a few different games from you, right? So it's not just that one $5 purchase. But let's say it was just $5. Comparing it to something on eBay, right? When you see something on eBay and you've paid $1 for it, that person, whoever sold it to you for $1, they, unless there's some kind of maybe they work with a bigger store or a bigger company, and they're able to get some kind of either a tax write-off or some other kind of deal when it comes to the post office. If you're just one person, so if I'm putting a game on eBay and I'm only charging $5 for it, or I put it at 99 cents a bid and it only stays at 99 cents and I gave you free shipping, I'm losing money on that. I'm not gaining money, right? Because think about that. When you have to ship something out of the post office, it could be maybe $7, right? You can't use media mail because media mail, which is actually really cheap, about like $4, but the post office considers media to only be things like movies and books, and it's kind of silly because it's video games, but still. So movies, books, and I think comics as well fall under media mail. So when it comes to media mail, that's the cheapest way you can do it. But if not, then you're probably going to be paying something like $7 or more when sending out certain video games. So yeah, even if they're that small, right? So the point is here is that you have other fees as well. You don't just have shipping. You also have eBay take a cut, and you have PayPal take a cut as well. And I forgot the exact percentages and the exact numbers, but if you've sold something only for $1 or even only for $5, there's a chance that you're kind of taking a little bit of a hit, or you're barely making any money, or really you're just kind of you've made no money, right? So best case scenario, if something is on eBay is really, really cheap and the shipping is either free or really cheap itself, the person selling it to you is actually not making an enormous profit unless they ended up getting that game, for pennies years ago. But even then, it's still, you got a game for a penny, but then how many pennies did you make after shipping and after eBay and PayPal's cut? So when it comes to selling retro games and buying retro games, you're going to notice that on eBay occasionally there might be a higher premium. Not that there should be, right? Not that I'm a fan of it, but it does exist because of all the other people kind of sticking their hands into that pie to take money from the person who's selling it, and so they raise their prices to account for that. Also, another issue with eBay, I feel like I'm doing a debate now where it's like contention 1, eBay, contention 1A, eBay's pricing, right? So eBay wants to make money. Duh. They're a company. I think that makes sense. But the issue with them wanting to make money isn't that they want to make it. It's the fact that now, I don't know how long this has been going on, but now eBay has something that basically tells you what a price could be or what a price should be. And that's very frustrating because, just because like you can have one game sell for $1 and most of them sell for $1, but one copy, for some odd reason or another, even if, let's say, one copy is a loose cartridge and one copy is a sealed game, but eBay, unless it's in different categories or unless maybe certain key terms, eBay's algorithm could potentially separate the two, but it might just think that it's the game. So one sealed game can go for, $100. I know some people might say, what, it should go for more. It really depends on the game, guys. And you and I both know that, especially some longer time, collectors that are listening in here, or video game players, retro game collectors, players, etc., that not every single sealed game is worth hundreds or, even just $100. But let's say that it was. So loose cartridge, $1, $100 for sealed. eBay might think, well, this is, it's somewhere in the middle, clearly. And that's not really the case, right? So eBay's going to try to suggest to you a price that may not actually be the right price, but someone who doesn't know, who isn't doing their research, could then put it up for that price. And even if they leave it up there for a while, if one person either bids on it or takes that, I don't want to say bait, because again, it's not like someone is trying to actively deceive you. Some may, but I don't, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. They're not trying to actively deceive you, but if you end up seeing someone or you end up taking that, then all of a sudden now eBay thinks, oh, so that's what the price really should be. So, you put it up for 50 or someone put it up for 50 and someone actually took that and bought it at that. Oh, well, then that means that it should be at that price. So then eBay starts suggesting what the price should be based on what the last few purchases have been. So, or certain, a few, maybe 100 or a few dozen. So that's one of the issues with eBay. Not just the fact that, you end up having to, a bunch of these different costs end up taking away from your revenue stream, but then when you're trying to put it on or someone's trying to put that item on eBay, now all of a sudden eBay's saying, hey, this is what it should be, despite the fact that it might not actually be going for that much at all. Another issue as well is that when someone doesn't know what they're selling or how much it should be going for, they could easily immediately look up best match instead of lowest price plus shipping. Or there's actually a little check mark that you can check that says sold listings. So instead of going into those, people may end up just seeing best match, and because eBay wants to sell, whatever they consider the best match price, which obviously will not be the lowest price plus shipping, all of a sudden they're trying to sell you a game, quote unquote, complete in box, whatever that might mean to the seller, because sometimes that means different things to different people. And then all of a sudden, you end up having a game at $50 when really you go to lowest price plus shipping, and you might find one that's even more complete in box for $10. And it might not even be a bid, it might just be a buy it now. So that's definitely something that is kind of an issue with eBay, because then there are people who just only go by eBay prices. Even if they're selling them at, their flea markets or retro gaming cons. And again, as I mentioned earlier, when you're selling something in real life versus on eBay, there aren't any fees when you're selling it in real life. Of course, if you're selling it at a con or at a flea market, I'm sure there's some fees to get in, both as a seller and as a consumer, but the fees are a lot different than a fee per sale, right? So that's the first issue right there, mostly with eBay. But moving on from eBay, right? Even though there are a bunch of, I think those are all the issues I can cover with eBay. If there are any more, I'll bring them up later. I'll bring up some later contentions, some later subpoints for that eBay contention. But moving on to not just eBay now, just the fact that these games are 20 to 30 years old, some 40 years old, and when it comes to these games, I know that, again, so you're coming into this, right? You're brand new. To you, everything is classic, everything is a masterpiece. You really want to get into this, you want to delve into this, and you want to collect these games. However, we have to remember that the same way that you might look at a PS4, Xbox One, or Nintendo Switch game today is the same way that kids and other people looked at these video games back in the past. Now, I know that there are some people who do buy 2 of every game and buy, collector's editions just to try to flip them and try to buy 2 of them and all that stuff, and we'll get to some of those issues later. But when it comes to back in the day, right, if you're a kid, you might not be taking, good care of your video games or of your boxes, or you might even be throwing them away. I mean, heck, you might have a game that doesn't work, and you might actually look to your parents and say, hey, mom, dad, whoever, whomever, grandpa, grandma, whoever your guardians are, and you might sit there and go, this game doesn't work anymore. And if they don't know any better, they think, well, we bought that for little Timmy 3 months ago and it was $60, but these hunks of junks, well. And then you throw out games that nowadays people look to and they think, what, that game, that's so rare and valuable and that costs a lot of money. But back then, the idea of, I have to collect this, put it on a shelf, that wasn't necessarily the what people considered the norm. Right? Especially looking at how, retro video game cases are large. I mean, I love them, right? I love the boxes, but looking at how large they are versus jewel cases, looking at how large VHS tapes are versus, even DVD cases and stuff like that. Like, I was rearranging some VHS tapes. I got like a newer, it's funny, it's not new, but I bought the Star Wars VHS tapes from the 90s. I wanted to try to maybe do a comparison video for my other channel, TG Productions, and so I was buying a few really cheap Star Wars VHS tapes, and it was one of those Vader sets, so it looks real nice, but I had to move some other VHS tapes out of the way, and I'm sitting here and going, man, these take up a lot of space, right? I don't even have that many VHS tapes, but I was sitting there going, wow, these actually take up a lot of space, because whenever I'm working or moving around, like, jewel cases like PS1, PS2, even just some DVD cases, they're much more compact. So the idea of having this massive collection, I'm not saying people didn't do it 20 years ago, but you're not going to usually have a kid who's going to be able to, amass that kind of collection over time. Even the collection that I've amassed over time, it's really small potatoes compared to some people who were in their 20s at the time who were still collecting and keeping those games, together with their boxes, with their manuals and stuff like that. So the idea is that in some cases, not in all, but in some cases, the prices have risen because of the fact that there is a kind of scarcity factor. Now, you didn't hear me, you may have heard me use air quotes, but you couldn't see me use them. And the reason why I use air quotes is because not every single game is scarce and hard to find. You do have to look up some of these. So if you see a game that's really expensive and you think, wow, this game's really expensive, I wonder why, you should look up how many of the item were sold back in the day. So you look at something like if Mario is in the title, there's a good chance 99% of the time that millions of that game were sold, or a fair amount of that game was sold. And the only reason why it's more expensive now is because it's just considered popular because of Mario being popular. But that doesn't mean that there weren't millions of that game sold. There are millions, and I mean millions, of Sonic the Hedgehog games, especially the first 2 or 3. There are millions of those that were sold. There were not for resale versions, quote unquote, given out as well with Sega Genesis systems back in the day. There are so many copies of the game out there that you shouldn't be paying more than $10, and I don't know if this will be dated one day, but as of right now, you shouldn't be paying more than $10 for the original Sonic the Hedgehog. Some would say even more than $5, and I'm not even going to disagree with them there, but you shouldn't be paying more than $10 for that game. So there are so many different games that just because, they are very popular, it doesn't mean that millions of them weren't sold. Even someone saying, oh, that game didn't sell well. How not well? 500,000 not well? Or compared to, 4 million, did it only sell, quote unquote, only 2 million or 1 million? Because that's still a million copies of a game that could potentially be out there, right? So you have to think about that as well. Now, again, scarcity, like I said earlier, because, for all you knew, if someone, you're, a kid at the time, 20, 30 years ago, thinks, oh, this game doesn't work, and then they chuck the game. Well, the game wasn't preserved well, and that can happen. So I'm not going to say that that didn't happen, or that it doesn't happen, but let's also remember that it's not going to happen with every single game. So you don't have to sit there and just accept the fact that, a certain game that you think, wow, Mario's very popular, so of course there should, the game should be expensive. No. Same thing with something like Final Fantasy 7 or 8. Just because Final Fantasy is in the title doesn't mean it's going to be a lot of money. Now, there are, I would admit though, some of the, earlier Final Fantasy games for the NES, yes, they are also well sought after, but again, just because Final Fantasy is in the title, or there are other titles as well, like other franchises, in no way means that just because it's popular, it should be going for a certain price. You never have to look at a price online and think, well, that's clearly the price, because that's how we end up raising the price too much, and then that can become a bit problematic over time. So, like I said earlier, first reason, eBay. Second reason, the idea of people not really maintaining these boxes and these video games, and just, over time they break, right? I mean, sometimes people, spill soda on their stuff. Sometimes they just look at the boxes, they think they're cheap cardboard, and they throw them away. That happened to me when I was a kid, and I feel really bad about it. Not just because some games I thought, it's okay, I don't need to keep them. Other ones family threw away. They were like, oh, it's just cardboard, and they just threw them in the trash. And it sucks because now I look at some of these cartridges and I think, oh, you're so cold and lonely. So reason number 3 as to why these retro video game prices are so high. And this one has to do with, funnily enough, what I do. YouTubers, look, it's us. Hi, everybody. So some people don't want to talk about it potentially being YouTubers. And some people look at me and they think, Matt, you're crazy. Why are you calling out YouTubers? You're one of them. Why are you doing this? Are you a hypocrite? Are you saying it's not just you? No. It's me too. And I fully admit that. Now, why do I sound happy about it? Why do I sound... Some people are like, how dare he? The reason why is because of the fact that if I'm getting more people to like these games in some way or another, or to rediscover these games, or to just discover them in general, and then younger people are like, wow, I want to go into this and see what this is about and buy some of these, then that's awesome, right? I'm happy to hear it. I'm happy that more people are getting into this because of me. Now, I know at this point, as of this recording, I have a very low sub count and very low view counts, so I don't think it's just me. But it is a lot of us getting on YouTube, right? Now that cameras have become cheaper, cameras are on your phone now, and they're really dang good. You can edit stuff on your phone. Microphones are becoming cheaper and pretty darn good too. Very easy to record gameplay footage now. So all this stuff makes it easier for people to get on YouTube than to show off, not just their collections, but their love of retro video games. And then that gets other people to enjoy retro video games as well. So you look at something like the Angry Video Game Nerd, or originally he was the Angry Nintendo Nerd. I've really never seen any one of his videos, right? Nothing against the guy, just I didn't really, when he was very popular on YouTube, I actually wasn't watching YouTube for like retro video game content or just content, and like I was really watching it more for anime fan subs, just being completely honest with you. Like I was looking up, because at the time I didn't realize that they were illegal. I was just looking up like, can I see this on YouTube? So then I was watching it on YouTube when I was a teenager, and I was like, wow, this is fun. And then I didn't know anything else about anything else, so I really haven't watched a lot of his videos. But guys like him, Pat the NES Punk, and a lot of other newer YouTubers as well, or people who've been doing this for a while but have blown up rather recently. A lot of YouTubers that I do enjoy. Like it's funny, I've never seen a Pat the NES Punk review, but I love his podcast, CU Podcast, and also the Not So Common Podcast. So even myself, I don't know if I want to say that I was inspired by them personally, because I didn't watch their reviews or their gaming content to think, oh, I want to do this. In fact, I discovered Pat's stuff and a bunch of other YouTuber stuff, too many to name in this one little moment here. So I found a lot of their stuff after I started doing Let's Plays and stuff like that. Like I started off this channel doing Let's Plays. If you guys don't know, if you're new to the channel, started off doing Let's Plays, then kind of moved on to general gaming content, but also, of course, do Let's Plays as well still. But I also moved on to general gaming content. So I do admit, yes, I think that YouTubers have added on to retro video game prices rising, but I don't see why that's, again, some people think of it as a huge issue. Like, oh, if all the retro video game YouTubers either never existed or left, then the prices wouldn't have risen. Well, to that I disagree with, because of my next point, which involves smartphones, right? Even if all retro video game YouTubers left tomorrow and they just didn't do this anymore, I quit my channel. Every single YouTuber who focuses on retro and current video games just up and quit. At the same time, you have smartphones. So you can easily, at any point, even if you are someone who, let's say you find video games in your attic and you don't know what they're really worth. You just know that your older brother or sister had them, whatever, right? And you take out your phone and you start looking up certain games that, on eBay, they should be $5, but people on Amazon have listed them for a lot more for some very odd reason. So a $5 game, you're like, whoa, this is worth $35. That's amazing. And all of a sudden, you're freaking at a swap meet or at a flea market, and you have this game outside for $35. So, again, because of your smartphone, right? Or if you're at home, your laptop. But really, you can be price checking stuff on eBay on a smartphone as you're selling it. Don't do that. That's bad, right? Don't do that. But people can, and people have, right? So because of that, yes, YouTubers, I do think that's a valid third point, don't get me wrong. But also being able to just immediately look up anything at any point, at any time, but not have you can look at it to a surface, like on the surface, and see, oh, it's $35, but not, sadly, immediately be able to kind of delve into why that's wrong. Right? Even stuff like price charting and other websites that do that, they can be wrong as well, right? Because you have to be confident in the fact that they aren't taking things, like I mentioned earlier, sealed games and other kinds of, boxed games and complete and boxed games into account versus something like a loose cart, right? I say a terrible loose cart because, again, it could be a very bad looking loose cart, but depending on the game, someone can put it up for a really high price, or it could be a loose cart that looks immaculate, and it could be at a really low price. So again, all that stuff does vary. So while I fully understand the YouTuber point, because I'm one of them, right? But I don't feel like that's the only point, and more importantly, it's just one of many different points, right? It's just one of many different things, because for all we know, even though there are some studies that have been, there are some people that have said that, hey, if the Angry Video Game Nerd does an episode on something, right, whatever the game is, then the prices will go up on eBay. But of course, the question then becomes, so someone said that, and I'm not saying it's not true. Other people have actually confirmed that it is true. The price does go up for the game on eBay. But the question is, does it sell? Right? So you have to then go to the sold listings and see if those sell on eBay, or if people were just trying to capitalize on it, raise the price, and then no one cared. They saw his video, they thought it was fun, but nobody really cared. So that I don't know, right? But, again, just a little like small point with number 4. Smartphones exist. High-speed internet exists. It's so much easier to look up these prices, so you can't have one without the other, right? You can't have YouTubers and then say that there's no, it's smartphones or other kinds of ways to try to look into these prices, and vice versa, right? Where, smartphones could exist, but maybe without YouTubers, certain games wouldn't be as high as they are. But again, it's not like every single game that has ever been covered is also, has very, very, very high prices, right? So you can look at, I'm pretty sure you can look at a fair amount of games. At least every time I see a game on eBay or I hear of a game and I think, wow, this sounds really obscure, there will be at least a good 4 or 5 people who have done some kind of like long play or some like 5-minute video on it or some kind of review. Even games you're like, wow, I've never heard of this before. This isn't like a blind spot kind of thing where you're like, oh, this is a very big franchise that I've never played or something like that. No, you're like, well, this is really off. Like some random like sitcom got a video game, right? And you're like, well, that's odd. But there will be like some, YouTube videos about them. But that sitcom, that game, is still worth $5 on eBay, right? It doesn't mean that just because there's YouTube videos on it, immediately that's like, oh, well, if there's YouTube videos on it, then that game's gonna, it's being sealed for hundreds of dollars. Not necessarily. Now on to my 5th point, scalpers and resellers. So earlier I mentioned, resellers like, mom and pop stores, stuff like that. And I also mentioned the idea of scalping in terms of people buying 2 or more copies just to try to resell one, or not even resell to be fair, scalp one. So there is a difference, by the way. And I've mentioned this before in some of my other videos that I've done. But if you don't know, I do believe that there is a huge difference between scalpers and resellers, right? A reseller is just someone who's buying, so let's use the Super Nintendo Classic Edition or the NES Classic Edition as an example, right? So you buy 5 versions of the Super Nintendo Classic Edition, one for yourself, and you resell every single other one. Instead of being 80, you resell it at 100, right? I don't think, and I know I'm the person judging this here. I haven't done this myself, right? I don't even have a Super Nintendo Classic Edition. Tristan does. He actually bought it off me, saving me at the last second because I said, let's go to our local Toys R Us to actually get one, which is funny. You can see those vlogs on this YouTube channel when we actually went to do that at like 5:30 in the morning. But anyway, so the point is that if you do that, I'm not going to get on you, right? It's not, or I don't really think we should get on that person if they're buying an item and they're doing a small markup, right? But there's a huge difference between buying an NES Classic Edition for 60 and selling it for 80 or even 100, pushing it, but 100, okay, right? There's a big difference between doing that and buying it at 60 each and then selling them at 300. Now, I know some people are going to say, but Matt, if people are buying it, then that's capitalism. But again, I'm just saying that, look, you can say that. I'm going to get on their ass for it. Why? Because there's a difference between saying, hey, because look, if they were still, which they are making more NES Classic Editions in late 2018, but if they were still making them at the time, then yeah, sure, man, buy an NES Classic Edition and try to sell it for $20,000. Okay, do you. It's not only going to work, but you do what you want to do, right? But there's a difference between that and then looking at retro video games, and this has been confirmed. Some people have done this. Some people have done it either as a social experiment, and others have done it for real, and we've heard stories about it and stuff like that, where you've had people who have bought X amount of a game, and sadly, it kind of corners the market, and then they can put that game up for whatever price they want to, and that doesn't mean that it's necessarily a rare game. So, looking at, the NWC cards, right? The Nintendo World Championship cards. There are not a lot of those. So when you see one of those going for a very, very, very large amount, then there's a reason why it is, because those were given to championship winners, right? They won the Nintendo World Championship. So there weren't, millions of champions, right? Although I don't know if, I think some people won the championship. Others, I believe you could mail it in, although I don't know if they got the gray card or not. I don't remember the story about that specifically. You should probably watch the Pathy NES Punk video about that. But my point is that when it comes to that cartridge. Okay, makes sense. But there's some games where you look at something like Earthbound, and Earthbound should not be, I mean, look, it's not hundreds of dollars, it's not thousands of dollars, but in my honest opinion, and some of you guys, if you've seen some of my Matt Reacts videos, I just laugh at the prices of Earthbound, because I kind of look at Earthbound and I'm like, guys, Earthbound is an amazing game. It's amazing, right? Don't get me wrong, I'm not shitting on Earthbound. What I am saying, however, is that Earthbound has been re-released multiple times. You can play Earthbound. I know it's a bit different than, obviously, having the physical cartridge. I mean, as someone who plays these games, collects these games, of course, I'm not sitting here and saying all of us should pirate. I'm just saying that there are so many different ways to get it. You can emulate it as well. You have retro pies as well. And I'm not going to try to be that person who says retro pie for life and kind of praise to the retro pie, because that gets awkward. And I'm not a big fan of that. But all I'm saying is, it's just, to me, I don't know why you have 3 to 4, 5 pages of Earthbound and you see many of them at $75 plus or $100 plus. There's a fair amount of them that, to me, I think the price can go low. And personally, I remember I was seeing a video by RGT85 where he was saying it just takes one person to bring the price down lower, and then everyone else starts caving and bringing the price lower. So what I'm getting at here is the fact that, for all we know, right, there's some guy or some person that has multiple copies of like a little Samson, sealed, right, factory sealed, not even some shitty reseal. I'm talking about factory sealed here, that they ended up getting at, some Funko Land closing, and they got 20 to 30 to 40 of these, and they're just sitting on them. Maybe they're reselling them. Maybe they're not. Hell, maybe they're reselling their cartridges because they also ended up getting them, loose cart. Maybe they're selling those for hundreds and just sitting on these complete in box versions. Maybe because they want to feel better about themselves, okay? Or they want to do it for profit, and they're just. But again, it's a bit different. Like, look, I love capitalism, but it's a bit different when someone has the ability to make more. If I had the ability to make more legal, and I'm not talking about repro or fake cartridges, legal little Samsons, and then started selling them at, $80 for a full complete in box little Samson, I can bet your ass, like, that's capitalism, because then all of a sudden people are like, oh shit, we have to try to sell ours at a price that matches his to try to compete in the market. That's capitalism, right? Capitalism, to me anyway, isn't cornering the market on something that doesn't exist anymore to then say, oh, well, I can make the prices. I don't know if that's capitalism. Yes, money is being exchanged for it. Yes, it's technically involving, currency and selling things and products, but I don't know. It's a bit hard to call that capitalism when we talk about capitalism innovating, breeding competition when someone's cornering the market because you can't compete because the cartridge isn't being made anymore. Rant aside about scalpers, you can see why I'm saying that, retro game prices can be high, because in some cases people have cornered the market. People have bought so many copies of either one game or one game in box, stuff like that, and by doing that, they're essentially they're making the prices, right? Which is why I don't really put much stock personally. Like, even if I had the money, I would feel very awkward about paying $600 or less. Well, it depends on the kind of less, right? Maybe 50, 100. But I feel awkward paying more than 100 for a little Samson, especially more than 100 for a little Samson loose cart. Now, if you've done that, that's awesome, right? I mean, I hope you like it. I hope you love your little Samson. But for me, I don't feel comfortable doing that. So what I'm trying to, so that's the reason why. One of the reasons why retro video game prices can be so high, right? It's not just about eBay. It's not just about where you're selling it. It's not just about, the eBay terms and conditions and what they're doing. It's not even just about YouTubers, right? It's not just about smartphones. It's not just about the fact that even though they say 4 million sold, how many of those have survived over the years, right? At the end of the day, it can also end up just being someone having multiple copies of a game, and these games aren't being made anymore. Right, and because they're not being made anymore, now all of a sudden we, as a unit, not as a hive mind, but as like a collection of fans, we start naming the prices. right? We start saying, oh, that's a good price for that game, and oh, that's a sports game. There's so many of those. That'll be $10, right? That'll be, doesn't matter what, it doesn't matter if it's a WWE game, doesn't matter if it's a, an NFL game, no matter what game it is, even if it's a really good game, sometimes if it's either a sports title or there's some other kind of caveat to it, it'll be lower, right? So it's not even just about popularity, it's also about how many were sold, and then at the end of the day, it's also about who is selling it, right? How many seem to be in the market versus how many should be in the market, because again, for all we know, there are thousands of little Samsons out there, but a certain amount of people have just bought more than one, more than 5, more than 10, and we just don't see that. Right? So you do have to think about those, the few things that I mentioned throughout this rant as well. You have to think about all those things before just kind of shelling out cash to buy a game, because for all you know, a game that's 50 today is 25 tomorrow, is even less the next day, right? So I think if I am going to give you some advice in any of this, I would suggest that don't just jump on a deal because you think that there's no other option. And there's no other way, right? There's always another way. There's always another option. And I would definitely suggest that if you're not an agoraphobe, and I don't say that negatively, I'm saying if you feel comfortable going outside and it doesn't give you a large amount of anxiety to go outside and see large groups of people, I would suggest going to some retro video game conventions if you have any in your area. And even though you might be paying, $30, $50 entry fee, that might actually end up being kind of negated when you look at how much cheaper some video game prices are in person. Because I think most of this rant was surrounding prices that are online, because personally I buy more stuff online than going to retro gaming conventions in person. But, and of course, looking at things like flea markets, a lot of those have dried up. I think the oldest games that I saw at a flea market, I did some Flea Market Monday episodes, and to be fair, one of the flea markets, quote unquote, one of the episodes did consist of an actual thrift store, so not a flea market, but the first few flea markets that I went to, the earliest thing that I saw was a Game Boy game, and it was Game Boy, to be fair, sure, but it wasn't anything NES, Super NES, related. So sadly, flea markets are kind of drying up. But when it comes to going to retro gaming conventions, maybe going to there, that might be cheaper for you, because again, you go online, sometimes these retro video game prices are pretty darn high, right? So like I said earlier, guys, these are all the reasons why retro video game prices can be so high. It sucks. It isn't forever, though. It isn't eternal. So remember that before you make your purchase. Remember that, buy the game if you want it. And if you want it in your collection, that's also cool, too. Remember to buy the game if you want it, because at the end of the day, if you're collecting loose carts, I'll say this much. Loose carts are the cheapest thing. If you want to go for just, I want this on my shelf. These don't have to look the prettiest, but I want loose carts. Those are the cheapest. The most expensive, I would argue, would either be sealed games, i.e. factory sealed, never opened. I'll do a Matt Rants about that as well, or just a simple Q&A, because there are some differences to tell whether or not it's either sealed officially, like factory sealed, or it's been resealed. And frankly, I'm not saying I'm not against resealed if it's a cheap price, but of course, if it's being resealed, there's a good chance of being resealed to try to fool someone to think that it's officially factory sealed, and then it'll go for exorbitant amounts of money. So again, going for the tiers, right? We have lowest is loose cart, then we have with a box, then we have complete in box, i.e. not just with a manual, either if it came with a poster, if it came with some other little fixins like Nintendo Power ads or something like that. Then we have sealed above that. Then, of course, we have the highest, which I think is the most bullshit. It isn't just sealed. It isn't just in a box. It's VGA graded. If you're a VGA graded collector, my response is cool. But if you're wondering what that means, that's just, you can send your video games out to get graded, and if they have a high grading scale, then they can be worth more money. But they then put the games behind hard acrylic that you have to chisel and hammer your way out just to get to the game if you ever did want to play it again. So and by the way, it's not like it's just sealed around the game. It also has like a little tab up above with the seal rating on it. So basically, if you want to get a full NES collection, I believe it's like, what is it, 700 games or so. You can get that, right? Even in box. I understand some might go, oh, 700 games in box. That's a lot to have on my shelf. But imagine trying to grade and have in acrylic with tabs 700 games. So you can collect them if you want, VGA graded. I'm just saying. But anyway, I want to thank you all so much for listening to another episode of Matt Rants. Please remember to like and subscribe if you liked the video. If you didn't like the video, you can still like and subscribe either way. Also, comment below with any of your fears, or maybe you're collecting stories, maybe some cheap deals that you got, maybe some expensive deals. Even if they were deals, they might have been a little bit expensive. And just tell me why you think retro video game prices are so high. I've said what I've said about them. If you want me to go more in depth in the future, I'll totally do another one of these. Maybe go into some other points that I can't think of right now. But overall, I hope I've been fair. I really, because I feel like, sometimes you have people coming at all fronts about this and this and this. So I hope you guys thought that I was fair on, even on the YouTube issue. And all that matters, though, is if you're new to the fandom, if you're new to collecting, if you're new to buying retro video games, I want to welcome you personally. Thank you so much for listening to this. And also, I hope you have a good time in the fandom. I hope you have a good time collecting these games, playing these games. I hope they're fun for you, and I hope it's as fun for you as it's been fun for me and fun for everybody else who is a part of this gaming community, this retro gaming community. All right, guys, love you all. Take care. Hope you had fun, and see ya.